Got it.
Good
Boom.
afternoon, and welcome to Straight Talking with Kelly, where real conversations happen. This is where you'll meet some of the most intelligent, talented, and creative people who come to share resources, tips, and knowledge on various topics. My guests come from many industries that include music, television, theater, community advocates, culinary arts, fashion, hospitality, oh my goodness, and so much more. Join me today and welcome my guest, Mr. Franki Jupiter. He is an artist, arranger, and songwriter. But before I welcome you, Mr. Jupiter, I'd like to read a little bit about your background.
Uh-oh.
And so, and then we will get into our conversation about how Franki likes to connect authentically with people through his music and his upcoming record release.
Yeah.
So, the coalesced consciousness of a menagerie of Jovian moons, Franki Jupiter, celebrated vocalist of the year, three-time Battle of the Band winner, multi-instrumentalist and lifelong singer and songwriter who weaves his penchant for poetry and communication into tantalizing tales of love and belonging. Equal part philosophical and playful, he's likely to contemplate the end of life as he is to celebrate the steps taken to create a new one. When he's not juggling the profane and the sacred in his musical creations, he can be found yanging his yin with his favorite trio, Guru Ji, what is it?
Wabi and Sabi.
And Sabi. May I ask, who is Wabi and Sabi and
They're my
Guru Ji?
cats.
I was wondering, like, who are these people?
Guruji is what I call my partner, Grishma. She's my guru, my love,
Okay.
my source of devotion. And then Wabi and Sabi are the two little cats. One's a Maine Coon mix, and the other's a little naked Sphinx cat with no hair. Crazy.
Oh my goodness. Well, Franki, welcome to Straight Talking with Kelly.
Thank you.
I wanted
Kelly, welcome to Straight Talking with Franki.
Absolutely, because that's exactly what's getting ready to happen. So before we get into our conversation about, how you connect with your with
Sure.
people through your music and your upcoming record, let's walk down memory lane. I
Okay.
met you at the Plant Studio Records with Arnie Frager. He wanted me to meet you so badly, and I'm glad he did. I remember telling Arnie that I believe that you have that special quality, they call it the it quality. And it wasn't just because of your beautiful voice or your talent as a songwriter, it was you. Straight away you exuded friendship, self-confidence, and goodwill, and you focused your attention on learning more about me. And I find that rare, especially in an artist. Usually it's all about me. What about me? But what about me? And you
What
were
about us?
You see what I'm saying? And you were completely different, and that stood out to me. So, Franki, tell me, where were you born and raised, and what schools did you attend?
Okay. I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, and I went to Parkway West, represent Longhorns, go Longhorns. It was a different life. But then I went to in Columbia, Missouri. I went to University of Missouri, Columbia, Mizzou. My alternate timeline, of course, is that I was raised as a collection of moons around Jupiter. So I mean, it's whichever you want to believe. But yeah, I grew up in the Midwest. I'm a Midwestern boy, salt of the earth person here.
Okay. So tell me, when did you realize that music was your calling?
Oh man. So my dad's a musician. He's a singer and songwriter, classically trained opera singer, pianist, guitarist, amazing musician. And so I grew up in a house where there was music. And my sister also, gorgeous voice. My mom, I love her, and she actually is now. As I'm older, I'm recognizing she can carry a tune. But as a kid, apparently she likes to tell this anecdote, which is terrible, but I think telling in some ways. That when I was like 3 or 4, at some point, because she was so out of tune singing me a lullaby, I asked her if she would please not sing me lullabies, which is horrible. I don't believe it. It doesn't sound like me, but I imagine.
Wow.
But yeah, I started playing piano. I think we always had a grand piano, baby grand piano in our house. I started playing piano when I was like 3-ish. I heard something on the radio that I liked, so I sat down and started plunking it out on the piano.
Oh, wow. So
Yeah,
you were
and I think
actually
that
playing by ear? You play by ear?
I think that kind of set the tune, pun intended, for how I did learn to play, which is largely by ear. I can kind of fake my way through sheet music. If you give me like an hour per page, I can eventually
Okay.
plunk it out. But
That's not bad.
yeah, I definitely learned by this. I was inspired by the stuff I was hearing, and the music that was around me, and then did the church choir thing and all that. Grew up and did a little bit of choir in school and all that, but I've just always been surrounded by music, and
Okay.
it's been such an important part of my life that it feels like you're sort of born with it, right?
Yeah.
Like everyone, not just me, but everyone's sort of born with it, and you just decide whether or not you want to put that energy into making it your life, your career, whatever.
That's so funny that you just said that, because that was my next question to you, is that I was going to ask you, now that you're in it, there's no turning back. And what was that realization like for you, where you decided this is going to be my career?
Yeah, I guess it's sort of a multi-fold path in a way. Like I always get the sense that I've had many lives, not necessarily before this one in the sense of like, oh, I once was Napoleon, like 50 other people were, but that like within these 30 some odd years that I've had on this earth, like I've died a few times and have kind of come back as a totally different person. And I had careers as a marketing person, doing sales. I had careers as a wedding photographer, which I did for about a decade, and doing fashion photography and all kinds of different stuff. And in my 20s, my early 20s, right after I dropped out of college, basically to join a band, that old cliche, and I was sure that's what I was going to do. And it's something that even from the age of 3, I probably was, rolling around in the back of my head, this idea of like, I'm going to be a musician someday. And then you realize like, oh, there's no someday. Like you just decide at some point in your life, like, is this what I'm going to commit my time to? And it's not a matter of you find the right thing or the right person or the right place or any of that. It's just like, am I willing to dedicate myself to this? And like I said, like once I dropped out of college, I dedicated myself to it and said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And then in spectacular fashion, as it always happens, the band broke up after a few years, and I was devastated. I mean, it was something that really took a toll on me, and I won't say it turned me off from music, but it took me a long time to find my feet as a musician again. I kept writing here and there. I would get occasional bursts of inspiration and go, oh, okay, I'm going to write something. I'm going to do something with that. But I had another band after that didn't quite work out, and then another band after that didn't quite work out, and then I just felt myself trying to put a square peg in a round hole. Like I just kept being like, I'm gonna make this work, and I think I burnt myself out and kind of quit. And then cut to a few lives later, I was moving to Bali, Indonesia, right before I moved. Not too long before I moved, I met Arnie Frager, and I had no idea who he was, but a friend of mine told me, hey, you need to go help this guy move if you can. He's a guy up the street. I was living in Inverness at the time, and it'd be great if you could help him move. I think he does something with music as well. You might like spending time with him. I was like, okay, cool. He does something with music. I'm into that. So I roll up at this dude's house. And like one of the first things when I first meet him, he's like, hey, could you move these into that box over there? And I'm like, what is these? And he points, and it's a stack of like platinum and gold records. And I'm like, whoa, hold on. First off,
I love it.
Big flex there. Second off, who are you? And then he just showed me, the stuff that he'd work on. And it was stuff that I grew up listening to as a kid, like the stuff that inspired me, Michael Jackson, Prince, and all these cats, just like this music that I was like, there's no way. And so I told him right there, I was like, hey, we're going to make an album together. I hadn't touched music really in a while.
Well, you know what's so funny? Your friend, how serendipitous this whole thing was for him to just tell you that. it's so funny how the universe connects people together.
Yeah.
And if you're paying attention, you heed the
Mhm.
call. So the simple
Totally.
fact you said, okay, let me go help this guy move. And then you find out, oh my God, this really is the guy that I need to be helping move.
Yeah, totally. And
Yes.
I find that all of the best decisions come from a desire to serve
Yeah,
and to help
absolutely.
others and to just be available. Like I'm not the type of person who, subscribes to the belief that like say yes to everything. There's a
Yeah.
lot. I mean, get real
Yeah.
good at saying no, I would say.
Yes. Okay.
It's equally powerful. But when you get a sense of like, okay, this doesn't, this isn't going to put me out. This is something that sounds interesting. I'd love to help a neighbor out. When you have those opportunities, take them because you
Yeah.
really don't know who you're going to be helping. And
Yeah.
ultimately, whenever you help someone else, you're going to be helping yourself because it takes your mind off of all of your shit.
Yeah,
Pardon my French,
absolutely.
but
Absolutely. But that's true.
yeah.
So now tell me
And I
this.
always say, sorry to cut you off, but I always say I love that you said that if you're paying attention, um, that idea of coincidence. I don't think there is such a thing really as coincidence. I think there's just varying degrees of being able to sort of connect the dots with your own life. And if you can do it, if you really pay attention and go inward sometimes and look at like all those little weird coincidences, you start to see, oh, there's this golden thread, and that is sort of in a lot of ways what embodies it encompasses the sense of self. It's just
Yeah.
like, how do I connect these narratives? How do I connect these stories in my life? Oh, when I went and did that one random thing, and now all of a sudden I met my wife, or I met, my future business partner, or this, that, or the other thing. Like those are such interesting and important moments, but it's easy to miss them.
Well, but you know what I find now, one of the things that I know is that we send out prayers to the universe every day that we
Mm,
ask for something. And the simple fact that you keep saying to yourself or out, I'm a musician, I want to be noticed, I want to be seen, I want to be
yeah,
heard. And so, and the simple fact that you're doing steps towards that, then the universe says, okay, this person is really serious. So let me send him the things that I know that he will need. But
yeah,
again, you do have to be paying attention in order to know, because sometimes it's just opening a page, the right page in a book. And
totally,
that you read that passage and you go, this is what I needed. So
totally.
the simple fact that you and Arnie connected the way you did, and more importantly than that, that the synergy was right.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's the one thing between Arnie and I that has never faltered. It's just like our sense of, yo, we were supposed to find each other. We were supposed to connect around this. Like,
Yeah,
this is a beautiful thing that we're doing. Who knows what happens with it, right? He's had
right.
all kinds of great success in the past. I cannot, uh, put it into my head that, oh, it's going to be just like that. Like, it could be anything, but the process itself and learning through the process and having someone like him to inspire me and to teach me so many things and to encourage me to just be who I am and to use my voice and to be so kind of steadfast in his desire for me to be heard is
Yeah.
so cool. Like it's so cool to have a champion like that.
Well, you know what the funny thing, every time I get ready to ask you a question, you've already led into it. So that's very intuitive. You don't even know that you're intuiting, but that's what's
Good.
happening. So my next question was like, do you have any influence for a mentor? I know your father was one since he was a
Yeah.
musician, but was there a teacher or any other mentor that you've had along the way?
Oh my gosh, so many. Every person I've met, in one way or another, every single person I've met has inspired me in some way along this path. And even those who have tried to quiet me or silence me or don't want to hear what I have to say, those are some of the biggest lessons and biggest mentors you can ever have is the people that are saying, don't do this. Because then you get to go, ooh, let me think about why. Let me think about why this
Mhm.
person wants that quieted. And it really lets you double down on your own sort of your message and what you feel in your heart and what you know to be true. Because there's sometimes people go, hey, be quiet, please. And you listen and you go, oh wait, they're actually right. Like I'm out of line with myself. But like you said, in Tootin, like being able to use that intuition, I think is such a powerful, powerful tool that we all have access to all the time. And it's the most important thing, to just be sort of constantly in some way or another in touch with yourself. There's this one moment that stood out to me for such a long time that I think it was such a cool moment and so instructive. And, I started a philosophy organization with the son of Alan Watts, right? I'm working with the art of living right now with Sri Sri Gurudev Ravi Shankar. Like, there's these people that are like big philosophical overarching people who have instructed things, but then it's always the little quiet moments and like intimate places with a totally unassuming person that clicks something and they stick. And there was this woman, when she was talking about intuition, and specifically she was talking about utilizing your intuition while speaking. Someone had asked her a question at the end of her little lecture, and they asked her sort of like, how do you, you seem so comfortable, how do you get up there and just talk? Like, what, are you afraid you're going to mess up or blah, 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 blah? And she said, the thing is, I'm speaking in the right way. I'm aligned with truth. And because I'm aligned with truth and using my intuition, there is no faltering, because there's a steadfastness of the message, right? And I can say anything. I can just be in the moment and flow and talking. And because I'm aligned and I'm living in the right way with this truth, I'm not going to mess up. Like, there's no messing up.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. So now talk to me about your music. What's the overall theme in your music? And is there a specific genre?
Yeah, the overall theme. I think the overall theme, my partner would say, is love and now. Those are the two big themes in my life, are sort of the varying angles of approach that we have in love, towards love, away from love, and then nowness, right? This idea of being present and being in a field of sort of awareness of all that is happening to us and through us and with us and in us. And I know those are big sort of themes. Love, obviously, every musician's writing about love, so that's kind of
but you know what? It's, as you say that, it makes me think about your upcoming release. So you want to talk about that, because that's definitely about love, maybe love gone wrong, right?
Yeah,
kind of.
Yeah, kind of. I don't think it was love gone wrong. I mean, because and without getting too specific in it, there is a person that inspired this song, and it's really, in an interesting way, the song is a lot about kind of consent and sort of trying to be in a new situation with someone who there's clearly love between the two of you, but the next move is neither can anticipate it, right? Like, and so you end up sort of like swooping in and grabbing these little chunks of a person and going, is this it? Is this the thing I'm looking for? And then pulling out a piece of yourself and going, is this the thing you're looking for? And it's like this sort of interesting back and forth. And oftentimes when love becomes over intellectualized or over philosophicalized, like, you lose something of the potential holistic nature of love, right? Like the totality of yourself, being in love, being in unconditional state of love and surrender and all that. Like, when you start to really overthink it, you lose some of that. So there's like certain parts in the song where I even allude to, like, you'd rather read it in a letter, so let me tell you something, right? Like, it's this idea of like I wanted to show you all of me, but you just kept wanting to take pieces of me. And like, so let me script this, let me write this out for you, exactly what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. And it's sort of, there's a degree of snarkiness in it, there's a little anger, there's a little sense of like indignation of like, oh, how dare you take
and that's where I got the love gone wrong. That's why I felt that piece in it. But then I also felt that another piece in it where it was like, oh my God, it had me even thinking about some of my relationships.
Yeah.
Because it's like when you said you took a piece of me, it's like, really? And then you just bounce, like, really?
Yeah. Yeah. And
So
so there's when it comes to the whole consent thing too, that which is also a big theme, an overarching theme in my music. It's just like it's autonomy and consent and conversation around what you're willing to give to someone or take from someone, etc. But there's like a whole fantasy part in the song as well that like sort of goes into like, this is what could have been, this is where I saw, this is my daydream, and then it comes back into reality and stuff. But yeah, I think it is in some ways love gone wrong, in the sense that it wasn't like the one and it didn't last forever. But I think in so many ways those are some of the most informative relationships we have, are those relationships where like we do kind of come in and go, is this it? Is this it? Is this it? Because you find when you start carving out pieces of yourself, or when someone else starts taking pieces of you and analyzing them and overanalyzing them, it really does do something to allow you to sort of go, well, let me look, I've never really looked at it that way. I've never really thought about it that way. And I think that is universal. Like, and that again comes to, it circles back around to that dynamic idea of like being in the present moment with something. Like when you step outside of that, if you get too far outside of it and you get too in your head or too in the dynamic of a relationship, and you're not actually focused on, on intuition, on love, on heart, on all those things that really make relationships work, and communication, very open communication.
Well, you know what? And then the other thing too, and this is not just for romantic relationships, what I was speaking of, it's also just in relationships, period.
Totally.
So it's, so this song is not just about romantic relationships, it's about friendships, it's about even parent and child, know?
and that's an interesting word choice, because I have this sort of mindset, I think, that it doesn't let me separate those for some reason. Like the idea of friends and lovers and even some family, that there is an idea of romance that goes through all that. And that's kind of me, right? Like I'm sort of this crooner boy.
That's Franki Jupiter, and you got to tell me about this name. Tell me about Franki Jupiter. What does that mean? What is that all about?
It's a lot of things. It's a reference to a lot of artists who I love. It's a reference to the place that I was in when I decided to do this thing. Frankie, San Francisco, Frankie Valley, Frank Sinatra, and then the words together, the name together, Franki Jupiter, is sort of like this. It has a ring to it.
Yeah, it does.
And it's a big homage to Freddy Mercury, which is F name with an I at the end, and then planet with beautiful. 3 syllables. So yeah, and it just kind of, it was one of these things where when I did decide, so hopping back to when I decided to work with Arnie and vice versa, right after that happened, I was sort of like, I moved to Indonesia, and I was going to be living there for an indeterminate amount of time. And working with a plastics upcycling organization, Ecstatic Ocean Initiative, and just kind of totally radically changing my life, because I needed something. I needed a new chapter. I needed a reincarnation of myself. And so I found myself in Indonesia and sort of starting to get back into, because I'd taken a pretty long hiatus from music and from being overtly creative. And so I started getting back into it and started writing poetry, writing music again, playing a little bit, picked up a guitar while I was there, and just was really starting to be like, I could see myself actually maybe doing this. Like I had already teased the idea with Arnie, but I only half believed it and he only half believed it.
Okay.
And so then I kind of just said, okay, am I going to do this? Like, if I'm going to do this, this needs to be a total overhaul of what I've been doing, which was largely image-based, not sound-based. There was a lot of photography, videography, design, website building and all that kind of stuff. And so I had to sort of like shift gears. And as I began that process of shifting gears, I sort of found Franki. I found Franki Jupiter, and this character was part of it came through dreams, part of it came through a dream I had when I was probably 15 years old that I just kind of remembered again. which was this. I woke up from this dream and it was this crazy, like long series of mathematical equations, which meant nothing to me, but there was a number churned out at the end. And that number was 34.369,446. And it was called the Aquinas Wave. And so I was like, oh, okay. I know. And I'm still trying to figure out what it actually means, or if it doesn't mean anything, but I've used it as a sort of kind of like anchoring tool throughout my life to do various things. So when I turned 34, that was a big birthday for me. When I, if I ever were to play the lottery or something, I would probably choose numbers related to that. Those numbers have significance to me. There's like this whole sort of overarching thing, but I put together, when I got back from Bali, I put together a sort of demo that was about an hour long of just one song bleeding into the next, bleeding into the next, bleeding into the next, bleeding into the next. And I called it the Aquinas Wave. And I sent it to Arnie and I said, look, man, because he'd never, at this point, he was sort of like, maybe I'll work with you, but he'd never heard my music. And so I was like, okay, here you go. This is what I'm capable of. And he listened to it and was like, okay, all right, this needs a lot of work, but I think there's really something here. And that was sort of the moment where it solidified for me, like, hey, you're doing this, like adopt that character, whatever it takes to become the person who is doing this. And what that was for me was Franki Jupiter. It was this sort of cosmic, that the highest parts of myself that I could think to reach. And in so many ways it is, I've done all these other things, I've lived all these other lives, I've helped so many people achieve their dreams and starting up their businesses or getting their bands on the road and having success with what they're doing. And I was like, why wouldn't I want to do this for myself? Like, that is ultimately the for me, it feels like the highest form of myself is creating music in a way that is conscious, in a way that's connected to the things that I love and carries the messages that I think are near and dear to me and are universally in some way enlightening. I mean, not to toot my own horn, because I certainly fall short of it all the time, but to strive towards that and to create that character of Franki Jupiter. And then within the name, obviously, there is Jupiter. There is the sense of this giant body in the sky that is surrounded by all these orbiting moons and has all this mystique and power, and has been such a prominent sign through astrology and mythologies of the past. And Jupiter, aka Zeus, like this sort of creative body. I think that was a big part of why Jupiter. Also, again, Freddy Mercury, man, it just rang. It just felt right. I love Freddy so much.
And I'm sure he is definitely smiling at you because you're keeping his memory alive in the hearts of others. So I'm sure his fans will connect with you in a way also because of the fact that, you hold him so dear to your heart, to the fact that your name is very similar to his.
I hope so. That's cool. That's a cool thought.
No, I really believe that. Now, the other thing, you always, again, lead into what my next question is. So you are definitely in tune with me. I can tell you that.
Good.
So my next question is, what is your creative process?
Yeah. It's again, one of those sort of like many-fold things. I don't have one set process that I go to every time, but something that I think is super important and is right here. I just always have some way to write down thoughts, lyrics if they come to me. Everyone's always got a phone on them. I use that as well. Oftentimes I'll pull up a voice recorder. So what I sort of do is I get myself in the mood. I say, hey, I want to write today, or I want to practice today, or whatever it might be. And I'll sit down and I'll do some breath work. I'll do a little meditation and kind of just like get to a place where I'm feeling nice, relaxed, and sort of a little turned inward. And then it begins the sort of process of like mining, as it were, just sort of like sifting through the various thoughts in my head, the various feelings in my body, and seeing what comes up. And when you do this enough, you start to get into the habit of like, first off, being able to access it more quickly, but also putting what can often be amorphous, nebulous concepts that are just sort of in the galaxy of your mind, sort of crystallizing and concretizing them and putting them into some form that is like, oh, okay, I can turn this into a song, or this is at
Okay.
least some lyrics, or this is a poetic image that I like. And so as you do that, you start to hone down in on what works for you, what works in your own personal creative process, and also you start to just come up with this like ore, as it were, right? Like the raw materials of music, the visuals, the lyrics, the poetry, the little, melodies and harmonies that trickle through your head, and you start to get a little collection of them. And then comes the really hard process, which is doing something with them and making them final, which no song is ever final. It just isn't. But you get to an iterative version of it that you're like, I'm happy with this. I'm happy to share this with people. And that process for me, what that usually looks like is I'll pull up, I'll take all of my physical written notes and I'll type them into a document, which are usually lyrics. And I'll just have all these lyrics sort of in a cascade on a document. Then I'll pull up all the voice notes that I've taken on my phone and I'll put them all into a folder. And I'll have 3 folders that I put together. One is like yes, one is no, one is maybe. And so if there's these little ditties, these little moments where I go, ooh, yes, like yes, absolutely that. I'll name the track something like great melody at 32 seconds. And then I'll put that into the yes folder. And then I'll do this with, there's hundreds of them. I'm constantly just going, da, 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 da. And then I'm like, that's horrible. Boop. But I save them. I save everything. And then I listen back to them with a fresh brain later. And then I'll sift through them until I've sort of winnowed it down into, okay, there's 120 in the no folder. There's 50 in the maybe folder. There's 10 in the yes folder. And then I'll go through, okay, there's another 15 that I can put into the yes folder. So that I'm looking at like 25 seeds of songs that I'm like, any one of these has real potential to turn into a song. And then I just decide, okay, are there lyrics that I've already written that might work for this, that might fit in this? And so I'll play that part of the song and then I'll read over the lyrics. And it's like this kind of manic, like, when you picture a guy like posting all the like the pins. I'm thinking of Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, with all the pins putting together the conspiracy theory board on the wall. It's kind of that a little bit, and it's this moment of like honing everything in and shaping it, and then going, okay, there it is. This is enough that I can build from this. And then you start thinking about the form, and you start thinking about, are there melodic changes I can make? Are there chord changes that I can make that would make this more powerful? Does this need a bridge? Does it need this? So there's all those iterative processes, and that's what it usually looks like. And then every now and again, you're on.
Now, is that part? Can I ask you? Is that part of, like being the arranger? Is that?
Yeah, I think, and I think definitely. It absolutely is. Because you're arranging. You're arranging the music.
Right, that's what it sounded like. So it's like, okay, this is the arranger part of your task.
I think a lot more of the arrangement for me, in the way that I think of arrangement, like as it gets sort of, put on an album liner note.
Right.
That version of that is sort of like, once you've got the song done, and then you come in and go, oh, we need a trumpet here.
Right.
We're going to put this part here. It's a little more technical, a little more, but yeah, that's definitely.
So that's what I was going to say. So there's different levels to arranging.
Totally, yeah.
So that it sounds like the creative process is the first part of it.
Sure.
As you are totally doing that. I'm not.
And ultimately, how far back you want to go? The arrangement of atoms in the universe are affecting the way the thought that you're having right now.
Absolutely.
So it's like,
absolutely.
It's all this process of arrangement. But like, just to jump back real quick, like there are moments. That's the sort of nitty gritty songwriting and creative process part. But there are moments where I'll be on a walk, and because I've done so much of this ideating and work in the past, and like I know well enough what the structures are that I like, I know well enough sort of what the general keys are that I'm comfortable in, and what the melodies are that excite me, and that like there'll be a moment where I'm gonna walk and it just a song, just a full song just is
Okay.
there.
Okay.
It's like you walked into it and went, oh shit, I got to get that down. And I'll pull up a voice memo, and largely the song is there arranged with all the parts. And it won't have all the lyrics typically when I do it this way. I'll just be kind of like, there might be a few lines that like are there, but a lot of it's just literally just syllables, just me kind of scatting to like fill in the space.
Okay.
Um, those are nice. Those are good moments. Those are fun moments when you go, oh, that was so little work ultimately.
Right.
But that's few and far between. A lot of
Well, I
it's
don't know
just
if you're familiar with,
not hard work. But.
I don't know if you're familiar with The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron.
Okay. Yeah, I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
Oh, well, I love her, and I've been with her books, practically all of her books forever, but I did a seminar with her last night, a
Oh,
workshop,
cool.
where she was a guest speaker. And one of the things that she had you do is take long walks, because the long
Yeah.
walks is how you connect with your spiritual side. And that's how you can get questions answered. And that's how you recite that song, how you get sent
Totally.
songs.
Yeah.
Now, my other thing I want to ask you is, we talked about how you authentically engage, connect with people through your music. And so I know you love engaging with your fans. Why is that, and how do you do it?
Yeah. Why is that? Because otherwise it's purely masturbatory, which is fine. Like, it's fun to play music for yourself.
Right.
I really enjoy it. I think if I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't care to do it for other people either. But having that, it becomes a conversation when there's someone listening to it, in the same way that an artist who paints something, there's three things there. There's the artist's vision of it, there's the artwork itself, and then there's the viewer's interpretation of it. And there are three different works of art, essentially. And that same is true with music. Like, not just from the sense of it being an artistic endeavor of like, oh, I want it to become realized through the ears of someone else. It's more like there is a real conversation that happens there, where people then go, dude, this part of the song, like, that hit me, that I had a, like you said, I was listening to a piece of me and I had experience reminding me of loves that I had. Like, it's sort of, it allows people, and especially with the type of music that I like to write, it gives people a mirror, not to just see Franki Jupiter and be like, hey, look at shiny Franki Jupiter,
Right.
but to look back sort of at themselves as well, and to go, oh, this is how I feel about this. There's times where I'll listen to a song that I've heard 1,000 times, and I'll hear it in a particular moment that it just shakes me, and it rocks me into my core, and I go, oh my God, I know I've heard this song so many times, but I get it. I really get it. And those moments of like recognition of self in others, I think, are so important, especially now more than ever. Being able to sort of like hear or interact with someone's art and find yourself in it is such a powerful thing, because it shows us like, yo, we're all I have a song called We're All Part of Something, and it that is like the core ethos of so much of what I do, is this idea that like we don't necessarily know what this giant game of life is, or if there's a purpose, or what that purpose is, but we get to define it through our stories, and we get to define it through our interactions with others and how we live, and to be able to create music that moves people and can live with them in their hearts and in their heads, and that they'll sing and hum to themselves, and it makes them feel something, and it reminds them of something powerful within themselves, and it inspires them to create for themselves and for others as well. Like, there's nothing better than that. And how do I do it? Honestly, one way that I do it is through the music itself, is relying on my real life conversations with people, and experiences that I have, and moments that I share with people who I love, and using those as the bases for the songs I write. That's a continuation of conversations I might have had years ago. But then also just by being open to people reaching out. I have like, it's like Patreon, but it's called Ko-Fi, Ko-Fi. It's a company that does a really good job of like allowing creatives to connect with their audience. And I just set one up, and I just started a newsletter to start really like, practicing what I preach a little bit, and really connecting individually with people. So that's a good way for me to stay connected, is by putting up my works online and going, hey, talk to me about this. What does this make you feel? Is there a part of this, especially with demo stuff, as I get further into writing for the second album? I want people to start interacting with the raw versions of these things that I'm doing, and to say, hey, what do you think about this? Is this, is my message clear in this? Is the hook fun? Do you like the way this sounds? Like, I want feedback from people. And through COVID, when I wasn't playing out, and I haven't been on the stage in a while, but through that time, like, it was a lot harder to find that immediate sort of feedback loop that forms when you're on a stage playing for an audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
There's such a real visceral thing that happens there. And if you're not engaged, if you're not present with your audience, you will feel it, and your music will suffer for it. And likewise, if they've come and, they were there to see the band that played before you or that's playing after you, and you're just not it for them, like, you'll feel that, and it can be tricky. And so there will be times when you're performing and there's 20 people there for you and 100 people there for someone else, and you feel that, but then you lock into those 20 people, and all of a sudden that energy starts to grow, and look at that, now there's 120 people who are interested, because 21 voices were kind of singing back at them in a way. So there's this real power in music to connect people, not just in the like philosophical sense of through your consciousness and all that, but like in the very literal sense of like, we've been doing this for hundreds of thousands of years, making music around fires to connect with one another before language was even really a thing. It was primordial language, was just sound. In the beginning was sound.
Let there be music.
And sound is God. Like that whole idea, I mean, and it was good. And so I think like being able to utilize that deep part of ourselves. I'm such a loquacious person, as you can tell. I love to talk.
Well, I can see that, but you know what? I'm actually getting ready to segue out of that, but I thought that your answer was beautiful, because again, it took back to my opening. Remember when I said how he's more interested in how he connects with others as opposed to himself. And so you just did all of that just now. And so again, I appreciate that. Now, we're going to segue out of this music a little bit and get a little bit more personal. Not too personal, but personal in the sense that I actually would like for you, and I think you actually kind of did it early on in the interview, but give me 3 people that have inspired you.
Okay. Yeah, 3 people who have inspired me. One that's top of mind, and because I'm looking at a portrait of him, is Rufus Wainwright. He's one of my favorite artists, singer-songwriter. I think he's underrated, and I only say that because the whole world isn't constantly screaming and doing backflips about him, which they should be. He's one of the most brilliant songwriters that's ever existed. And he's openly gay and was one of the first artists who I think really owned that in a landscape that wasn't all that friendly to it. And as a queer individual myself, and as someone who's out and always coming out, I think that it was such an inspiration to see that and to be like, whoa, and he was singing about stuff that people weren't singing about, and talking about things that were happening in his life, and about love and addiction and all kinds of stuff. And it was just really powerful, and it hit me at a time. I mean, I found out about him through a friend of mine. Shout out Kristen, what's up? Back in I'd say probably early high school, maybe before that. But he was just a really, he's always been this totemic kind of person, and I've had the opportunity to meet him. He's an amazing dude as well. But yeah, Rufus is one of them. Who else? Two other people that really inspire me. Terrence McKenna. Terrence was a psychonaut and a philosopher from the, I guess, 80s and 90s, and sort of was a big influence in just his way of thinking about the world and of thinking about how we operate within this culture and within the operating systems that have been sort of pre-installed in us, and how to get away from those, and how to get to create your own sort of narratives. And he's also just so much fun to listen to. He's also so hopping back to the loquaciousness, he's super wordy, and I'm such a nerd for words, because I recognize just how much of an illusion language is, and how we create these fictitious realities that sort of encircle the actual sensual reality that's all around us. And so much so that we can like sometimes look at a thing and just go, oh, I know what that is, right? Like, oh, look at a door. Oh yeah, I've seen 1,000 doors before. Well, you didn't see this door. Like, it might be slightly different. It might open in some secretive way, but like we have these pre-built sort of notions of what a thing is. And Terrence does such a great job of dispelling that, and of using his language in such a way that he has this funny, nasally little elfish voice. I love Terrence. Terrence and Rufus. Who else? Who's someone that's really inspired me? That's a great question.
Well, you mentioned Frankie,
Freddy Mercury.
Freddie Mercury.
Yeah, Freddy definitely. And in the same vein as Rufus, and for a lot of the same reasons. And just because he was just so unabashedly himself. And that for me is such an important part, I think, of everyone's life, is to get to a place where they have the autonomy and the freedom and the peace and the ability. And some people never have the ability to reach that, not by any fault of their own, but this is a huge world, and it's so full of people who are born into suffering and who will die there. and to be someone who has so much freedom and so much privilege in this world, like, I feel just so unbelievably blessed and lucky to be able to use that in a way that is connected to others and to help others. And so to see someone like Freddie, who used the privilege that he had and also showed a lot of the quote unquote faults, societal faults that he had, and celebrated them, and was open about who he was, and just said, this is me, take it or leave it. I don't care if you leave it. I'm going to keep going on my path. Like, that's a huge thing for me.
Okay.
Yeah. So
So
yeah,
now-
sure, Freddie.
So now tell me this, what would the 9-year-old Franki Jupiter say to the adult grown man, Franki Jupiter? What would he say to you right now?
I like your earring. Honestly, he probably would. I was a deep and a nerdy and a weird little kid, and I love that kid, and I struggled with who that kid was when I was a kid, but now I can look back and look at that, the me, little Justin, he was Justin then, and just love him, and vice versa. I think he'd look up to me.
Okay.
In some ways, which is a weird and humbling thing to think about, but to know that, like, hey, this is who I am, and this is who you are, and this is who you become. Like, you're happy, you're at peace, you have people in your life who love you, you have a good connection with your family, you are autonomous, you have
That's
your own
beautiful.
power. Like, there's so many things that I pined for even then as a kid that I felt like for one reason or another, I felt like such a misfit. And so much of my life has been to help the misfits recognize that, yo, you fit in, and you fit in the grand scheme of things, but also you have a whole community of misfits who want to celebrate the weirdest parts of you, not just accept but celebrate, and who, for them, the most interesting thing about you is those things that you might find most unsavory or might be most scared of within yourself. And I think that's what 9-year-old me would, maybe not in so many words, maybe though, but just to really be like, hey man, you seem really cool, you want to go throw a ball around or hang out or something? And I'd be like, yep, I sure do, bud.
Okay, so before we leave, I'd like for you to say something profound to the audience. Let them know when your record is going to be released, and then how they can reach you.
Yeah, okay. Something profound.
I know you can.
I said it.
Look, I know you can do that. Okay.
Yeah. I think the profoundest thing I can say to anyone is just to live in love, and especially when it's hardest, be in love. Be in love with yourself. Be in love with everything around you that you can. And even though, God, things are a mess. Things are a total mess. But they always are, and they're always going to be. And if you focus on the mess, you'll find yourself in it. Focus on love, and even if it's to combat that mess, do it from a place of power. Righteous anger is a powerful weapon. Use it, but ultimately keep your anchor on love. And that's it. I mean, I don't know what is there profound to say that hasn't been said a million times already.
Well, you know what? Tell me this. What would you say to an aspiring artist?
Practice. It sucks.
I love that.
And not just practice, but play, I think, is the better word for it. Like, just play. And it's love again. Fall in love with your instrument. Fall in love with your voice. Like, there was so much of my life where my voice was like, oh, I can't stand my voice, especially when I hear it back and record it or whatever. But learn to really fall in love with it. Fall in love with the weird parts of it, little fry parts and the little, just play with it. Be playful. If you have the opportunity to play, it's probably the most important thing you can do for the world, honestly, because not everyone gets that chance. So do it, and do it loudly, and do it often, and do it until you find something that you really love, and then focus on that thing and keep playing and keep playing and keep playing and keep playing. Don't try to do everything.
So now tell me this, when is the record going to be released, and do you have a name, or what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I think the tentative working title in my head for the album is Maybe I'm Crazy, because it just encompasses so much of what I'm feeling throughout this process, and the moments of getting way far deep into myself, being the Ouroboros, and just kind of, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe doing this is a crazy thing. Maybe transitioning away from a safe career is a crazy thing. And also I have a song called Maybe I'm Crazy that I really like. But the album's gonna start coming out in 22 days from today, when we're recording this. Okay. Yeah, soon. July 22nd is going to be the first single that's released, and it's Piece of Me, the song that we were talking about. And then I'm hoping, we're kind of shooting for like a 1 a month type of deal, where we keep releasing tracks, and once we've released maybe 5 or 6 solid singles, we'll put out the full album, which I think we've winnowed it down to 10 or 11 songs, but it was big, and it's getting smaller and better. So it's still a living, breathing thing, but I would say within the year, or at the end of the year, or maybe just at the start of next year, the full album will be released, and it'll be everywhere: Spotify, iTunes, YouTube.
Okay. So now tell me this, as we wrap up, how can people be in touch with you? How do they contact you?
Franki Jupiter, Franki Jupiter.com. It's a
Okay.
good place to start, at Franki Jupiter on Instagram. And then, like I said, if you want to get into some of the, I don't have links on my Instagram to everything else, but some of the nitty gritty stuff, some of the behind the scenes stuff, a lot of the things that the wider audience isn't necessarily going to have access to, I'll be
Okay.
posting on Ko-Fi or Coffee. I'm not sure how it's supposed to be pronounced.
Okay.
Ko-Fi,
Okay.
ko-fi.com /Franki Jupiter, same spelling, obviously. Yeah, and honestly, if anyone even just has questions about the creative process or about life in general or whatever, man, I love talking, clearly, and I'm happy to spend time with people, and it informs my process and hopefully can inform others' process as well, and it's just fun to talk.
Okay.
And
Well,
it's
with
fun
that-
to talk with you, Kelly.
Thank you so much.
You're such a wonderful host, and I just appreciate that you have this podcast and that you're using your platform to help other creatives to put their messages out there. And I think what you do is a really lovely and important thing. And it's been so nice chatting with you. We should do it more often.
Oh, we'll definitely do it again. I'm not done with you yet.
Oh, good.
So, Franki, thank you so much for being on Straight Talking with Kelly, where real conversations happen. I wish you continued success in your career, and I know you're going to do just fine because it's just in the stars. It's meant to be. All right.
Yeah.
It's part of that Jovian moon stuff that you talk about.
Yeah.
And to my listening audience, I'd like to thank you for listening. Please hit that like button, subscribe, share, and come back. And so, Franki, you'll definitely come back, right?
I will. I'll be back. And thanks everyone for listening. And thank you, Kelly.